bugs. So, we're going to check out something today from PancreasNoWork. This is Rogue Traders, Money, Power, and More Money. Rogue Traders are the building blocks in which 40K was made. They are the first book, the first codex was Rogue Trader. There is so much to look at from the perspective of the history of Rogue Traders, the lore of Rogue Traders. It is a whole segment of lore that you could dive into. But strangely enough, most people who are fans of 40K prior to the game being released, knew very little about Rogue Traders. And it mostly stems from the fact that in many ways they are rarely mentioned in terms of actual, storylines, things of that nature. But Rogue Traders are a foundational piece of Imperial lore. They are a foundational pillar of Imperial lore. They were the ones that scouted out the galaxy. They are still the ones that have the writs signed by the Emperor himself, protected on their ships, that give them the right to do pretty much whatever they want. They are freedom incarnate. Being a rogue trader is one of the best fates that you can have in the Imperium. Better than the nobility, I believe. We're going to dive into this. PancreasNoWork is going to deliver. We all know that. And it's funny, even I, as much as I know about the lore, and as much as I know about early Imperium history, I'm going to learn things from this, and I already know I will, because I myself have not studied Rogue Traders that extensively. Let's go!
Exploring the unknown has been the dream of people ever since the first caveman wondered if there was anything beyond his valley besides
Krug, you have club.
mammoths and tigers. Humans are curious creatures. We want to know what's out there. And in space, there's an entire galaxy of who knows what just waiting to be discovered. There could be all sorts of crazy planets and phenomena waiting for us, to say nothing of the potential for alien life. You know what's an even better thing than exploring the infinite cosmos, though? Exploring the infinite cosmos with the license to do whatever you want while having enough money to buy entire planets for no other reason than you find the color of the grass particularly interesting. And this lifestyle is just what you can expect if you're a rogue trader in Warhammer 40K. They're filthy rich, they have the express authority from the highest powers in the land to do nearly whatever they want, and they travel the galaxy with up to entire fleets of subjects to gain filthy riches, carve out their own empires, and really anything you can imagine a quintillionaire doing with their free time out of boredom. They've been around since the very beginning of Warhammer 40K, being the namesakes of the very first edition ever released. So why don't you take a seat and listen as I tell you about some of the most flamboyant individuals in all of the setting, the very ones who gave it its name and helped drive it to what it is now. Rogue Traders.
Rogue Traders, I'll put it to you like this, just to hammer home a little bit more what he's saying there. A rogue trader in modern day life would make Elon Musk look like a pauper. Like, that's what we're talking about here. That's the level of cash.
To sum it up in a nutshell, are a mixture of explorers, conquistadors, merchants, pirates, privateers, and really any single career or position you can think of that involves going to new places. But they can also be businessmen, missionaries, conquerors, and all sorts of other things that aren't strictly speaking related to exploring. Their overall job is to help expand the borders of the Imperium by going out and searching for new planets worth inhabiting, by whatever means necessary. What you can assume about all of them, though, is that they're filthy, stinking rich down to a man. The poorest of rogue traders live in the kind of luxury and wield the kind of power that just about no one else in the Imperium can ever comprehend of wielding. And I'm not kidding about that, because let me briefly tell you a bit about the rogue trader Lucien Garrett and his situation to set the scene of how powerful these people are. Lucien Garrett is of course a rogue trader, and his tale comes from the Rogue Trader Omnibus featuring the stories Rogue Star, Star of Damocles, and Savage Scars. He's a bit down on his luck to the point that he lives in fear of his dynasty dying out. This man, who by rogue trader standards is at the bottom of the barrel, is still wealthy enough to to own 3 starships, the main one piloted by himself, and the other 2 each piloted by one of his kids. When he gets roped into fighting the Tau during what I believe was the Damocles Gulf Crusade, he's automatically given a commanding position by virtue of being a rogue trader. This is, again, a rogue trader who's more or less on his last legs. That is the kind of power a rogue trader gets. Regardless of how powerful or poor they are, however, I fully believe that rogue traders are something unlike anything else in the Imperium, in a better place in modern 40k than they were during the Great Crusade, and let me explain why. A rogue trader is allowed to do what they want because of their warrant of trade. This isn't so much a get-out-of-jail-free card as it is a warrant to flip the cops a double bird and shit on the police car. In the times of the Great Crusade, these things were given out and signed by none other than the Emperor himself. It is an item that creates a new imperial noble dynasty by virtue of its mere existence.
And considering how massive the Imperium is about anything regarding the Emperor, the warrant of trade that a rogue trader has is a holy relic because it was hand-signed by Big E.
It's a hereditary thing and instantly elevates whoever received it into being nobility. Usually they were also granted some form of material goods as well, and since this was the Emperor doing it and he does not know the meaning of subtlety, material goods oftentimes meant fleets of battleships. This is obviously a very powerful thing to give to someone, because it basically instantly creates someone who is at once a general, admiral, merchant lord, noble, and all sorts of other powerful figures combined into one. The problem comes from who he would give it to and what the situation in the galaxy was like at the time. While he did give it to individuals as a reward for exemplary service or ability, he also had a habit of giving it to rival Terran warlords when he was taking over Terra. This is one of those cases where the gift isn't much of a gift at all. Sure, it was better than the other option, which is that the Emperor would just kill you and be done with it, but it was a reward given with the expectation that the Emperor would never have to see the rogue trader in question ever again, because they'd be too busy plying their trade to interfere with his politics. Second off, the state of the galaxy at the time was far more hostile to rogue traders than it is nowadays, at least in my opinion. Remember that the Great Crusade lasted hundreds of years, and at the very start of it, the Imperium of Man's holdings were Terra and nothing else. The Emperor would throw these people to the other side of the galaxy and tell them to prepare for his arrival or die. A galaxy that was at the time filled with alien powers hostile to humanity, which, while that isn't too different compared to modern 40k, it was during a time when there was no major Imperial grounds to rally around. You couldn't stop off at a fortress world or something for more men because there was no fortress worlds around at this point. There was no navy or guard to call upon because the Emperor was using all of it. They existed, and theoretically they might respond for aid, but they were about 30,000 light years in the other direction. If you found yourself in trouble you couldn't get out of, there was no beating a quick retreat and waiting for reinforcements. Also, if you did manage to retreat, the Emperor would be very curious as to why you didn't prepare that world for him. While you were filthy rich, it was still a bit of a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now compare that to how rogue traders act and do their job in modern times, which is something that's taken me 4 pages of scripting to finally get to the point of. I'm a great writer. Rogue traders in 40k still have to explore uncharted territory, true, but the Imperium is far larger. Let's be somewhat conservative with an estimate I'm pulling out of my ass and say that in terms of what the Imperium functionally has control over, it's got about 75% of the galaxy covered. This is accounting for things like the Ghoul Stars / the Halo Stars and other areas of non-Imperial control, such as Orc Empires and whatnot. There is far more room for rogue traders to retreat to nowadays, less distance they have to go to reach friendly space, just because Imperial borders are so much larger. If one exploring the Ghoul Stars or some other area of space finds themselves in danger, they might only be a few systems away from safety, not an entire galaxy. There's also, of course, all the infrastructure that the Imperium has to call upon, rotting that it is. Rogue traders can at any point ask the Ecclesiarchy, the Guard, Space Marines, pretty much everyone, and they'll more or less have to work with them. Space Marines and the Inquisition obviously less so, no one can really just boss those guys around, but rogue traders are important enough that they'll probably have to be smart about refusing them. Even if you can always just kill the rogue trader later, they can and will be petty enough to make life hell for people to tell them to go away, so sometimes it's best to just bite the bullet. This is because Imperial law and religion states that something put into law by the Emperor himself can't be refused no matter what. And since warrants of trades either came from the Emperor or the High Lords, who are technically acting as his voice, you better believe rogue traders can swing their weight around even without their own considerable resources backing them up.
Yes,
they could also just pay you massive amounts of money and resources to do what they want. That's not uncommon at all. Rogue traders also don't even need to leave the Imperium in order to do their job. While yes, a map of the Imperium is technically just a picture of the Milky Way, it doesn't control nearly every planet. A quick Google search shows that there's anywhere from 100 to 200 billion planets in the Milky Way. Of those, another Google search says that there can be anywhere anywhere from 20 to 60 billion planets within the habitable zones of their stars, where even if they don't presently have life on them, the Imperium has the capability to terraform them without too much effort. The Imperium may have a million worlds, but it's always looking for more. Rogue traders, whose job is to expand the Imperium, are perfectly within their rights to just fly around systems nominally under Imperial control and look for planets worth setting up mining operations on, fortresses, or even colonization. In fact, that's...
And here's the big thing about this. Rogue traders can technically... there could be a planet out there. There could be a planet out there that survived the Dark Age of technology and the Age of the Imperium with functioning STCs that has not been found yet. It would not be beyond the realm of possibility, because there have been several times where, you know, they have just happened upon things. In several cases, the discovery of Necromunda was one of those cases. They accidentally found Necromunda from a bad jump. That's how Necromunda was found, by the Imperial Fists. Well, not by, I believe it was by the Imperial Fist, but I know the Imperial Fist fought the war there. But this is how it is. Not every star in the Milky Way has been explored and colonized, because they just simply don't know how to get there. There could be a planet out there right now in the 42nd millennium that could turn the tide of the entire thing, and that's why they have never stopped looking.
It's a wonderful way for rogue traders to do one of their favorite hobbies, starting their own mini-empire. That's something the Warrant of Trade fully allows them to do. They can do pretty much whatever they want on the worlds they settle as long as the Imperium gets its taxes. Just pay the tithes and you were the king of these 5 backwater planets. Congratulations. They can colonize and set up entire fiefdoms for themselves without having to leave the Imperium at all. And they don't even need to do that much effort to get rich. They can use themselves as glorified merchant vessels if that's all they want to do. And it's so wonderfully capitalistic of these kinds of rogue traders. They'll wander around Imperial worlds looking at market prices, seeing how badly certain goods are needed or wanted. Then they and their fleet of 20 warships fly to a planet with those goods in stock, go back to the first planet to sell it at a 500% markup, and make a profit large enough to buy another 20 warships and repeat the cycle. Of course, rogue traders can also be missionaries. One that's particularly pious and in touch with their religious side might take up ferrying artifacts to Imperial worlds, transporting priests, and even going out of their way to spread the Imperial cult. Even after 10,000 years, there's thousands of human planets, if not more, that have never been integrated into the Imperium, and Lord knows how many feral worlds that are Imperial in name only. A rogue trader who rediscovers one of these lost human worlds might pop on by and make sure everyone is worshipping the right god, and get rid of any potentially chaotic influence while they're there. Or they just kill everyone for worshipping the wrong god. This is the Imperium. You have one choice of god, and it's mandatory.
Yes.
And as expected of Warhammer 40k, rogue traders like Lucian Garrett can often be found at the heads of various Imperial military campaigns. One of the more common ones is being hired by the Munitorum to help ferry guard troops around, so sometimes instead of hauling thousands of tons of random garbage, they actually transport people. If the Navy is the one hiring or asking for help instead, they might partake in fleet battles. Or they can do both. There's 0 reasons they can't do both at the same time. Yeah, if the ship goes down, you just lost a couple thousand guardsmen, but it's the guard. There's a million more in the waiting room, who cares?
That's
and for
true.
the really ambitious rogue trader with more power and money than sense, they might just decide they're waging a war themselves. In these lunatics' defense, when you have access to an entire private navy fleet, not much is going to be able to stop you. And war can be a good, if dangerous, way to complete all of their usual objectives at once. Spread the Emperor's domain by conquering new worlds from xenos, spread the Imperial cult among those who resettle it, and get filthy stinking rich from all the loot you took when no one was looking. In fact, that brings us nicely to the rogue trader's most interesting way of making a profit: trading in xenos artifacts. As a rule of thumb, that practice is beyond illegal. This is the sort of thing that will get someone executed on the spot, but rogue traders have a couple of things going for them that make them particularly suited towards this trade. For Navy is the one hiring or asking for help instead, they might partake in fleet battles.
Oh, that was weird. Where are we at? There we go.
On the spot. But rogue traders have a couple of things going for them that make them particularly suited towards this trade. For one, when you're out in the middle of nowhere space, no one is around to see you pick the thing up and quietly put it in the back of your cargo hold.
True.
When you're beyond the Imperium's borders, no one can see you break the law, so pilfering xeno civilizations for goods is common. But rogue traders are also usually an odd bunch, and aside from a couple key figures, are usually the most tolerant Imperials around. Very frequently will rogue traders have trade deals with xeno civilizations that they use to sell these black market goods in the Imperium. After all, if you loot someone's grave, you can make a profit once, but set up a deal lasting generations and you can make money forever. Rogue traders being rogue traders, they care a lot more about money than the consequences most of the time. If the idea of them not being instantly annihilated by the Inquisition for this seems a bit far-fetched to you, here's how they get away with it. I already said that this often happens outside of Imperial space, so obviously they can't get punished for it while they're out there. The Inquisition doesn't have an Inquisitor in every corner of the galaxy, no matter what it wants you to think, so as long as they aren't on a mission with an Inquisitor when they start grabbing random Necron weapons, they'll be fine. But that Ward of Trade also grants them no small amount of freedom. In short, it basically says they can do almost anything they need to facilitate their efforts in expanding the Imperium. They're going to be out of friendly territory for a while, you see. Sometimes you gotta make do. If that happens to involve doing some rather unorthodox things, such as Emperor Forbid peacefully talking to the Xenos, then that's just what's gotta be done. Some of them even outright ally with Xenos, as those of you familiar with the Rogue Trader game may be. You want some Xenos in your crew to help facilitate relations or further skill sets? Well, go nuts, my friend. As long as you can in some way justify it as benefiting the Imperium, you're legally invincible. Also,
This is actually quite true. The warrant of trade lets any rogue trader get away with things that would make you just... I'd be hesitant to say that they are probably one of the only institutions that doesn't have much to fear from the Inquisition, because to get the Inquisition to go after you as a rogue trader, you really, really had to do something. I mean, you had to do something god-awful major in order for the Inquisition to take one look at you and go after you for that. It's rare. Stunningly rare.
they're rather mobile fellas. You need to catch them in the act if you want them taken down, meaning you might have to chase them across the galaxy to do so. Unless they're particularly stupid, they probably aren't going to be hoarding wealths of alien artifacts on any planets they own, so you can't just stop at their house while they're away and bust them on possession.
True.
Of course, even with the leeway and power they have, these are outstandingly rich noblemen whose entire existence revolves around making as much money and accruing as much power as possible. Some of them go a bit too far, and because of the leeway they have, when they get busted for something, they get busted for something huge. Imagine it as someone being protected by law from being prosecuted for a misdemeanor crime. The only thing you can get them on is a felony charge, otherwise it just doesn't count against them.
Right.
So if you catch this person, they're getting felony charges. Likewise, a rogue trader isn't getting busted because they looked at a xeno with anything but contempt in their eyes. They're getting busted because one of their starships is 90% crewed by orcs. Worse still are the rogue traders who get into their mind that they founded their own mini-empire, so why do they have to pay the Imperium its taxes? Especially amongst the ones owning territory outside of the Imperium proper, this is one of the more common ways that rogue traders rebel from the Imperium. It's also one of the easiest things to punish them for, unfortunately for any rogue trader rulers. Because how it usually works in this scenario is that the rogue trader stops paying the tithe and declares independence, the High Lords eventually hear of this, they eventually act on it, and then every planet in the rogue trader's possession is glassed. Funnily enough, sometimes the High Lords create a new rogue trader dynasty, and their first order of business is to give them a load of ships and tell them to go blow up the last one that rebelled.
There
It's
you
like
go.
an infinite feedback loop of rich assholes. Some of them also outright become pirates. After all, word is slow in the Imperium, so it'll take a while before anyone can tell the High Lords or an Inquisitor you're stealing from Imperial trade lanes. But this time, a pirate lord rogue trader, who in this case is a very literal rogue trader, is mobile. They aren't necessarily going home to their mini-empire, even if they might still have a few planets under their sway. They can just
And even still, if they can rationalize it, they can get away with it.
gallivant around the galaxy as often as they need. If they're running low on supplies, they can just go mug an agri-world and they're set for another year of space piracy. This is of course dangerous and they'll probably be shot on sight, but catching one of these bastards is a challenge all of its own. Plus they usually get at least a few ships as a gift alongside the warrant of trade, so they're probably heavily armed by default. Rogue
Yes.
traders might also just decide that working with Xenos regularly is more profitable than it is with the Imperium, or even that they agree with Xeno ideals more than the Imperium's. After all, I imagine Tau Tau cities are, if nothing else, cleaner than Imperial ones. Really,
That's heresy. I will take Imperial filth any day over Tau propaganda.
there's all sorts of reasons a rogue trader might become a renegade, and given their incredibly powerful and versatile positions, bringing them to Imperial justice is no easy feat. You might be wondering that if they have all this power and potential to rebel, then how did the High Lords ever manage to keep them loyal? So let's talk about some of the responsibilities rogue traders have and other downsides that make the job a bit hard as well. First off is that while it's not quite as much the case as when the Emperor did it, becoming a rogue trader is often a similar sort of deal to the original ones the Emperor made. The High Lords might decide a rising political rival is best gotten rid of, but for one reason or another, they can't just kill the guy. So they give him a fancy ship, trillions of dollars, and a warrant of trade before telling him to go explore for the Imperium. For all the reasons I said earlier, it's not as bad for these guys as it was 10,000 years ago, but it is still used as a way of removing people from politics. Aside from that, rogue traders will usually have some kind of objective they regularly have to fulfill when a warrant is granted. It's something that's equal parts ensuring they actually do things other than sit around enjoying their newfound wealth, as well as making sure the Imperium can keep a bit of an eye on them. Generally, it'll be checking up on a planet or planets within the Imperium every now and then, most often far-flung ones that are rarely heard from. There will usually be all sorts of pomp and ceremony once they land, but ultimately this is all simply done to make sure both the rogue trader as well as the planets in question are still loyal to the Imperium. If the rogue trader doesn't fulfill these duties, they're in trouble. On the other end, if the planet does anything but bow and scrape to the rogue trader's every whim, they're fully within their rights to blow it away.
Yes, they are.
Anything a rogue trader might be expected to do regardless might be a mandatory condition that they have to do. Maybe the High Lords decide they need some more worlds settled, so the warrant will include a condition that the trader must settle at least 10 worlds in 100 years or something like that. Or maybe a particular region of space needs to be mapped out. Well, send in the rogues to do it. The specifics in themselves aren't really that important. What matters is that the rogue traders carry it out and bring benefits to the Imperium as a whole. They're also still expected to explore uncharted space, and who knows what you'll find out there. It's of course not as bad as it was before the Imperium became so much bigger. It's kind of like how you're never more than 120 miles from a McDonald's. There's only so much dangerous and unknown room in the galaxy. That being said, still plenty of spooky stuff out there to kill them. Even without any unknown horrors being encountered, out there a rogue trader might accidentally find himself on a Necron tomb world or an Eldar maiden world. Suddenly, an entire Necron dynasty or Eldar craft world might be bearing down on him, and now he has to deal with that nonsense. The early life of a new rogue trader dynasty is also probably the most dangerous time of it. Plenty of people have had the thought you no doubt had, the little voice asking why you don't just take your brand new massive fleet and fuck off to the edge of the galaxy. And the Imperium knows plenty of people would do this, since every now and then someone tries it. So early on, the missions that rogue traders have to follow up, like checking up on lost worlds, are usually a bit more demanding than a hereditary dynasty's duties. That way, by the time they have more independence, they're usually too invested in the Imperium to try and leave it. They'll also frequently be watched over by an important figure the High Lords send with them. This might be an influential priest, an administratum bureaucrat, or it might be an assassin who will brain you alive if you step out of line. So early on, it's probably best to not get too into the trading of xenos tech or being a bit too late on tithe payments. Someone will find out, and then you're going to get a visit from one of the meaner Space Marine chapters. And while it's not exactly a major problem, sometimes Imperial priests will demand rogue traders hand over their warrants of trade, especially if they're an older dynasty. Remember, some of these things are signed by the Emperor himself. Those are relics, and priests tend to want those. Obviously, the rogue traders don't just give them the damn things, since it's the proof they're rogue traders and not just really lucky pirates, so it leads to conflict every now and again. Not too often, but it's funny when it happens. This video has really just been me meandering through various rogue trader lore beats, so let's finish off by rambling off a couple more. As mentioned before, rogue trader dynasties are hereditary. When the dude who first got it dies, it passes on to their heir. As you might expect, this can potentially lead to all sorts of problems. Lucian Garrett from the anthology was in some trouble even before the book started. His biological daughter would have been the rightful heir of his dynasty, but due to marriage obligations, it went to his stepson instead. No, I don't remember their names, and I don't care to look them up. It's been a while since I've read the book. What I do remember, though, is that this understandably left the daughter feeling a bit slighted. She was certainly better suited to leading the dynasty than her stepbrother, though her stepbrother was still a capable man in his own right. So she made some deals with the Tau, which, you know, were the type that even rogue traders can't really get away with. No spoilers for that, but for what it's worth, I'd recommend the anthology. It's a fun read, and even has Space Marines in it. So if you're a Space Marine fan and therefore can't read anything if it doesn't jerk off the Marines at least a little bit, there you go. But yeah, Rogue Trader dynastic politics can be as cutthroat as you might expect.
Yes.
Rogue Trader's kids might also be frequently seen in other Imperial institutions, such as the Guard or the Navy. This is done both to get them valuable skills for when they become the head of the dynasty, as well as to keep them from being too fat and lazy off their parents' money. They're usually looked down upon by other people in these institutions for being the trust fund babies they absolutely are, but they'll at least come back with some newfound experience and maybe even some connections they made while they were away. There's also no single character archetype you could expect a Rogue Trader to have, beyond being rich and happy to show it. They can be eccentric as all hell, stern and unyielding, cowardly and afraid of everything that moves, literally anything. If you think that doesn't make much sense because the Emperor or High Lords wouldn't give a warrant to an absolute bitch, remember that they're both hereditary and frequently used just to get someone out of their hair. Maybe the
Also, remember the fact that this is the Imperium. And I shouldn't have to say any more than that.
The only reason the Rogue Trader is even a Rogue Trader in the first place is because someone important wanted them gone. Or maybe the first one was some legendary hero of the Imperium who's only a step below being worshipped as a saint, and his great 40 times great-grandchild is the opposite in every way.
Right.
And even though they're not canon, I think the best way to see this is from some stories of the Rogue Trader RPG, the tabletop, not the CRPG. If you just search Rogue Trader green text, they'll come up on Google Images. One of them has the single greatest line I've ever read, and the whole story of it is about the Rogue Trader and his crew dealing with a rebellion on a Tau-occupied world for no other reason than if they don't do any work within the next century, they'll have to switch to a cheaper wine. The other favorite of mine is just people making the Futurama cast in the Rogue Trader RPG. It's great. In modern 40k, after the Great Rift, Rogue Traders are doing much the same as they always have. The Rift apparently opened up some new warp routes across the galaxy, and Gilliman asked a whole bunch of them to go explore them. He didn't make them because he's a cool guy, but not a single one of the ones he asked backed down when he gave them the chance. So yeah, no real change there. It's nice to see, though, that even when the galaxy has been ripped in half by hell, the brave Rogue Traders will stop at nothing to make a profit. And on one final note, just to really drive home the wealth bit, in the RPG there is no concrete monetary system. Rogue Traders are so rich and their assets so diverse that you cannot possibly give it a monetary value in dollars or thrones or whatever you can think of. Instead, it uses a system of profit factor for your wealth. There are also rules for, among other things, establishing trade routes, not because it benefits the Imperium, but because it makes them money. Because even in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, money makes the world go round.
Yes.
Overall, despite all their challenges, this is probably the best job you can possibly get in the Imperium. You have the most comfortable job in all of existence, the money to get the best security, equipment, and weapons of the galaxy, and the power to basically do whatever you want. Will you sometimes have to do things you don't want and face unimaginable horrors? Yeah, sure, but so does everyone in 40k. Rogue Traders have the best chances of not only surviving these encounters, but surviving them comfortably and making a profit at the end of the day.
Right.
Because if nothing else, they can just hire someone important to take care of anything for them. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the disgustingly massive piles of gold coins. Rogue Trader, I barely know her. Ha! What a funny joke. Almost as funny as the fact that there's microplastic in your veins. You need to get them out. Get your skin off. Get your veins out.
No.
There's dangerous stuff in them. You need to...
No. Rogue Traders, I often say that you couldn't drop me into 40k. You couldn't drop me into 40k, period. Because I would hate it. I would utterly loathe it. There's only a few positions that if you were put into them in modern 40k, that your life would be somewhat approaching decent. Rogue Trader is about as good as you're ever going to get. Rogue Trader is better than a High Spire Noble. It is quite seriously the best life to have. Even if you have like a strict schedule because of all the stuff that you have to do to prove yourself as a new Rogue Trader dynasty, you're still living the dream. You're rich. You get to fly around. You have ships. You can set up your own pocket little. You can do it all. Being a Rogue Trader would be the single best fate you could possibly have. Warpugs, it would be the only fate that I'd be okay with. Excuse me. It'd be the only fate that I'd be okay with in 40k. Hold on a second. I gotta get this. Come here, you. Come here. There you go. Now, are you happy? This cat does not know how to stop, and you're purring. You're purring. Get out. One of these days, I want to get the Rogue Trader game. I want to try it. It ain't going to be for a while, though. It ain't going to be for a good long while. And the reason for that is I just don't have time to do it. Like, I really look forward to the weekends because I get a couple hours to play Manor Lord. Warpugs, I'm going to head out. You guys have a good day. All the PancreasNoWork's links are in the description down below. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Check out my links for merch and the Patreon. I will catch you guys next time. Oh, pirate's life for me.